Welcome to Using AI to Control Cost and Drive Growth, a fireside chat brought to you by the Controllers Council. My name is Neil Brown, Executive Director of the Controllers Council. And before I introduce our expert panelists and our partner sponsor, let me share some brief housekeeping items. First, we'll have Q&A at the end of the presentation, so please use your GoToWebinar control panel to ask our expert questions. Next, this webinar is CPE eligible with 4 polling questions, so please answer each poll for CPE or to benchmark your peers if you're not going for CPE. Please allow up to 1 week for CPE certificates. Also regarding CPE, you'll receive a brief survey directly after the webcast today, so please complete. And finally, you'll receive a link to this webcast via email in the next 24 hours, so no need for notes or screenshots. So with that, I'm very pleased to introduce our partner and sponsor, Brex, the AI-powered spend platform that transforms finance teams from reactive no-sayers to proactive growth drivers. With Brex, companies spend with confidence by empowering employees to make smarter financial decisions from anywhere. Brex provides corporate cards, banking, treasury, business accounts, and global payments, plus intuitive software for travel and expenses that make it easy to plan and track all companies spend in one place in real time. Tens of thousands of companies from startups to global enterprises, including DoorDash, Flexboard, and Compass, use Brex to proactively control spend, reduce costs, and increase efficiency on a global scale. I'm very excited to introduce our speaker and subject matter expert, Eric Joe, Chief Accounting Officer at Brex. Eric started his career in PwC's banking and capital markets practice and built over 11 years experience working with banks, brokers, dealers, and large multinational financial institutions and operational management. Eric is an inactive certified public accountant who holds a BS in both accounting and finance from Georgetown University. He leverages his comprehensive financial skills and knowledge to drive Brex operations towards growth and success. Eric, welcome.
Thanks, Neil. Just to get kick-started, let's go to the next slide. Thanks everyone for attending the session today. Hopefully you all know AI is a really hot topic across the finance function, across various companies. And we use it a lot at Brex today, and we're looking at ways to continuously improve our processes here in the finance and accounting team. And I'm looking forward to sharing them all with you. I am going to add one more bit to Neil's gracious introduction of Brex and myself, which is that at Brex, I think one thing that differentiates us from a lot of the software, financial software services companies that you might look at, we are actually two sides of the coin, meaning we provide the software layer to help you manage spend and analyze it and then book the right entries for all your corporate card charges as well as bill payments, etc. But we also provide the financial services themselves. And what that means is we provide software, but we also are the actual corporate card issuer. We provide the bank account ourselves. We have a great partner for the travel TMC work as well. And we're active in 120 plus countries with the customers that you see here, as well as the yearly transaction value that you see here at 20 billion plus. So we've grown a lot over the last 7 years of company operations. I've been here for 5.5. So if you have any questions, we can follow up with you after. Let's go to the next slide. So in terms of the agenda today, we're going to be going over, and this is a dilemma I face every day, but the dilemma between controlling costs, but also supporting growth at the company, especially since the end of the ZIRP era, zero interest rate period. In my sector, in the fintech sector that's venture backed, there's been a huge emphasis on thinking about our operating efficiency, but continuing to maintain top line growth at the expectation of our investors and other stakeholders. And so managing both sides of that it has been challenging, but there are ways to do that with AI. Second, we're going to think about kind of like, there is always a need to prioritize growth, especially for my company. When we were raising our $12 billion round, right, that was a valuation that was based on our forward-looking projections. And so to reach that valuation, to grow into that valuation, there was a lot of execution and further business operations that we needed to accomplish in order to achieve that. Third, we're going to go over, at the end of the day, I have limited resources. Those limited resources, I have to prioritize the day-to-day books and records and cleanliness of the financials. And then there's this hurdle of manual work to get there that kind of prevents my team from doing other valuable analytical work that might be more helpful from an FP&A perspective. Next, we'll go over how do you achieve all that? Well, how can AI be your ally in achieving those priorities? And then we'll finish off with some Q&A. And so one thing that we want to call out is, and I said this before, recent PwC poll survey mentioned how 89% of CFOs say that one of their top priorities is to balance cost cutting and growth. It's one of their top challenges, and we're all just being pulled in both directions. Next slide. And here's a quote, like, you think about marketing, and this is a quote where, and I'm going to just repeat it, but you can cut marketing spend as much as you want, but it's never going to get you to where you need to be. My takeaway for one of our favorite cost centers at Brex is I can certainly cut marketing spend, but if I cut marketing spend, then I'm not going to achieve the growth necessarily, assuming your marketing decisions and investments in marketing dollars are going to be helpful towards your top line. But if I cut all that stuff, I'm going to hurt my funnel 4 months down the road, or 2 quarters, or a year down the road, because some of the investments that you make into marketing and brand spend, you won't see you won't get immediate satisfaction. You have to wait to see the fruits of that labor come out like 6 to 12 months from now. So the reason I bring up marketing also is because it's the cost center at our company at Brex, where month to month I do, by the way, I run a corporate FP&A at the company as well, but when we do our budget to actuals every month, it's the one department or one cost center where they kind of get in trouble for going over, but they also get in trouble if they don't meet the expectation, because that means that they haven't done the work and services that we need to promote the business and win customers and to build the funnel. So I just think it's an interesting anecdote to think about related to growth. Next. And again, growth is a top priority. I will say the thing about revenue growth that goes hand in hand with cost cutting is that revenue growth is one of the things that also solves the cost cutting problem. Meaning, right, you're only cutting costs if you think the investments that you're making into those cost centers aren't working for your top line or the general operating efficiency of your company. And so one of the things that I always stress when I look at the budget to actuals and I'm working with our business stakeholders here at Brex is that, okay, if we cut this, sure, in theory, we will reduce our burn for the year, or we'll look like we're operating more efficiently. But if we're hampering our growth going forward, that also can't be the right solution, because the more revenue I get, in theory, that covers all the costs for the rest of the company as well. You know, when I talk to my CFO, we talk about this all the time. Revenue solves all illnesses at a business. And it's one of those things where, I mean, we're not at growth at all costs anymore at Brex, and I think certainly at most other companies around the world. But it's important to have healthy growth. It's important to try to sustain that growth, and it's important to do that so that, you know, the equity at your company is valuable to shareholders, and that you can run a operationally efficient business just for the foreseeable future. Like I mentioned here, right? Like, you know, if my job was just to cut spending and that was my, like, just to get the SG&A down, that's really easy. But then I have to work with my team and all the budget owners and business stakeholders across the company to ensure that the decisions that we're proposing or the recommendations that we're making related to cost structure actually make sense for their operations and to hit their own objectives and goals. So it's really important to align with everyone and make sure the decisions that we're making overall make sense. And it requires time. You have to spend the time and dig into the details with all of these folks. And where are you going to get that time is the next question. Right? And to get that time, you kind of have to think about all the busy work that the finance team is doing nowadays. And so questions that your team is always, my team still does from time to time is, okay, where's the purchase order for this request? Here's all the card transactions that are coming through. Some of these need receipts. We need to track down all the card holders and try to get the receipts in a timely basis so that we can book the expenses to the right GL codes. Invoices coming in and we're waiting on the business or department head to approve this invoice before we paying out. So there's a lot of coordination that we're doing across the function just to make sure administratively we have the right support in place so that we can proceed with our day-to-day bookkeeping processes. And so there are answers for this. There's been automation that existed for a while now, especially before with configurations that you can do within your ERPs. And then going forward, there's been RPA or robotic process automation. And now with AI, it's really what it's done. It's added a dynamic layer to existing technology to make their use cases a lot easier. And I'm going to go into these examples in more detail in a bit. I think we're going to go into our first poll question.
That is correct. So let us launch a poll here. It's our first poll. What financial workflows are most time-consuming and manual for your team? Select one of the following. So please use your GoToWebinar control panel to answer this for CPE credit or just to benchmark your peers. So please take a few seconds. Eric, I will post the aggregate results and leave it up to you if you want to comment on any of these, or we can just forge forward. So nearly all voting is complete. Let me go ahead and share the results. Do you want to comment on this, Eric, or move forward? I'll leave it up to you.
No, I think it's really interesting. The top two are actually, it resonates with me a lot, especially as a financial services company. We have, I don't know, roughly 150 bank accounts across all of our entities that actually perform the financial services for our customers. And so one of my dreams when I started at Brex when we were 70 folks, we were on QuickBooks at the time. We didn't have any reconciliation tools or anything. We were doing everything by hand. Through our growth, fortunately, I've been able to that allows us to automate some of those reconciliations going forward. But yeah, like the month-end reconciliation process across accounts totally resonates with me. One of the things that at Brex, we actually created so we implemented Blackline and we got SFTP integrations between Blackline and all of our major bank vendors. And so on a daily basis, and it took time, but with Blackline, we could automate a lot of the cash reconciliations with rules that we just continuously configure in the system day over day. And we have a 2-day SLA to reconcile all of cash. And we actually do that with 1.5 people. Okay, so we have 1.5 people in the US, but I'll be remiss if I don't say that we have 4 folks in India in the business process outsourcing. And so the way that works is at the end of every day, bank statements close for the day, the SFTP transfer runs from the bank to our system. It pulls in all the BAI or bank account information line by line into the system, and it just reconciles it line by line versus our general ledger. Now the key is, I think, to do the automation, you also have to automate the entries for the cash as they're coming in as part of straight through processing. So we did need to make some technological engineering investments for that, but that's how we just do it overnight. And then overnight, the India team reviews it, and in the morning, my team wakes up and can take a first crack at like all the stuff that they couldn't figure out overnight, and that's how we get the reconciliations done every day. That plays a huge part at month end because we flatten the spike. Instead of reconciling cash across all these accounts only at the end of the month, we've done it day by day throughout the month, so that we really limited the reconciliation work to just kind of month end stuff. And then on tracking receipts and employee expenses, that's actually a good segue into the next couple of slides.
Okay. Well,
Yeah.
that was some great detail. Thank you for sharing that.
Yeah, so again, it's the question that I asked before, but it's the idea that what could you accomplish with the dollars that have been allocated to you, or with your existing resources or what have you, if you could eliminate more of the busy work that you're doing, that you wish a robot could do for you. And if the nice segue was on tracking expenses and receipts. Going to the next slide. There is a better way to control and manage spend, and it's to automate away as much of the compliance and bookkeeping and GL mapping as you can. And so Brex, right? We are the corporate card issuer, and we've layered our corporate card with, not everyone knows what Brex is. I realize that. So what I actually end up doing is I compare Brex to Concur. And most folks know that Concur is a travel and expense management tool, helps you with getting reimbursements, helps you with managing compliance of all your corporate card expenses, and then mapping it into your accounting system. Brex is doing all that and also making it easier with a better user experience for the accounting team as well as the card holder. And so the thing that I like to talk about at Brex that resonates most with my peer group and other controllers and accountants is, at Brex today, we have 1,000 employees. Every single person has a corporate card, and we get roughly, we have a lot of stuff that goes through corporate card at the company because that's like our core business. We get roughly 2,000 to 3,000 transactions a week that flow through on the Brex card that everyone has, including the procurement card and everything. And the nice thing is that we treat the accounting process for the Brex card similarly to the cash reconciliation process that I just mentioned, which means that, right, we have a real-time view of the spend, and there's this automation. This slide talks about it, but I'm going to try to put it in accounting process words. Basically, at the end of every week, we're able to see all the transactions on our Brex dashboard. Within the Brex dashboard, we've configured it such that each and every card transaction that comes through on the dashboard, it's already been automatically mapped to the right GL account, to the right cost center, to any other attributes that you care about related to that spend. And we kind of do a cursory review on the dashboard of all these entries. It's a module called the accounting journal. But within the accounting journal, once we click a button, it all goes through to our ERP automatically. And it's really saved time as we've scaled the company. And then one of the other things that I saw from the survey was, okay, so it's also tracking down receipts, and it's also making sure that all the spenders on corporate card are maintaining compliance. The other thing that Brex does is it does try to make the user experience or the card holder experience much easier. So when you use a Brex card, the nice thing about Brex, and this is where having the software layer as well as the financial services layer is important in one company. We are a direct issuer on the MasterCard network. And so we have a direct integration with MasterCard and all the underlying detail of transactions on the card. So what that allows us to do is, if you forget a receipt, MasterCard actually gets the L2, L3 data when they work with the merchant. And then we also receive that data, so we can create an itemized receipt for you, even if the user has forgotten to snap a picture or keep a physical copy or what have you to scan. And what that's done for our company, and especially our salespeople who are on the road, you know, they swipe, we automate the receipt. Oh, by the way, when that initial budget for that trip got approved, we save down all the documentation for the business purpose of all those expenses, and we automate the memo for that particular expense. We read that through AI via just the documentation for the budget, as well as like looking at your calendar. And so I'll give a great example. A salesperson will be on the road, they'll take a client or two out for lunch or for dinner. It's on their calendar. Our system will look, it's integrated with their calendar, it's integrated with the budget approval, and then it uses ChatGPT, like a generative text tool, AI, to literally write out the business purpose so that the employee doesn't have to worry about that. And so that's just a small example of how AI can dynamically read data that's changing all the time from different sources and come up with the right output for a use case like this to maintain your compliance. The other thing that we're doing with AI at Brex is we are also trying to automate rule configurations for geocoding. So one thing that we have seen is that as a company grows, you expand your geo account, you expand the kind of like attribution that you want to do for measuring costs and other items on your books. And our accounting journal tool will seek out ways to, or suggest new rules for you to input into the configuration of your system. And it kind of takes away, it helps with creating the first step. That's really the nice thing about it. Because it's helped you with your first step, now you're in the job of reviewing and then editing versus just like creating from scratch. Let's move on to the next slide. So there are a lot of other examples of how at Brex we're using AI to do more with less. And I think this is a good stopping point to also talk about AI, which in a sense, it's all definitional. So like, what's the definition of AI and what's the definition of generative AI? I think AI has actually existed for quite a while. Going back a decade or even more, we've had robotic process automation. We've had automation related to how if data shows up a certain way, then the system will do X. If data shows up another way, then the system will do Y. That's also AI. Right? You've created a bunch of rules. The system is not dynamically creating new rules for itself to react to the sources of data, but that's also AI, and that's how I think a lot of companies have been automating. That's how a lot of companies have been automating a lot of the busy work over the last 10 years. The thing with Gen AI is that it can make that process a lot more dynamic, and I'll share a couple of examples. So one of the technologies that I've seen used, including at Brex, is OCR, so optical character recognition. You can use it for order to cash. You can use it for procure to pay. And what it is okay, you get the SOW or the order form, and then the order form will be read by optical character recognition. And then if the numbers are in the right places and all the terms make sense, then it'll produce a proposed revenue journal entry. Now, what it won't do is, what happens if your sales team is out there and there's a custom order? So what happens for that is usually you go through deal desk. It's a custom deal. It doesn't measure up to the standardized revenue recognition model that you have. and then gets pushed into the technical accounting or revenue accounting team, and they have to come up with a manual way of accounting for that particular contract or order form. And the more customized invoicing or the more customized negotiations that your sales folks have with your customers, the more manual the revenue accounting work will end up being. And that's all busy work. Now, what people are starting to do now is now combine OCR technology and the RPA that you can get from OCR with a generative AI technology. And what that means is, right, the tool will be able to then read the invoice or the SOW, excuse me, and then it'll spit out exactly what you need to focus on related to 606 going forward. And it'll make sure that, like, on this invoice, if there's any difference between this particular SOW and the standard SOW, it'll call those out for you automatically, right, through being able to read all the text and understand the text. And then it'll just create that first step for your revenue team or technical accounting team to do the following procedures. I think where we're going to evolve from on that side of the spectrum is it's first starting to just call out automatically for you all the SOWs that you need to do further work on. The next step is to then take the actual provisions in the SOW that are unique and to then produce a first level of review or first level preparation of journal entries or accounting work for then your revenue accounting team to spend time on. So that's just a way to automate busy work. Another thing that we've looked at, and by the way, this is from a company called Clarity, and it's spelled K-L-A-R-I-T-Y if you're interested in looking at them. They also do procure to pay. And the thing about robotic process automation for invoices and matching invoices to POs, what I found is that, well, invoices that you get from your various vendors are all different. There's no standardized way that your different vendors are sending you invoices. And so robotic process automation sometimes doesn't work because the number doesn't show up in the right place. And the tool has trouble reading the whole text and mapping it to the inputs that you need to put in your procurement system. With Gen AI, now the OCR can be a lot more dynamic. It can read all the text in the invoice. It can make sense of the numbers, even though they're in different places on the invoice, and it can spit out the inputs in a much more standardized format for direct input into your procurement system. And that's also another way to automate a lot of the busy work where typically, I would get all the invoices. My AP team would try to review them and map them all automatically. Not map them all automatically, but map them manually. With this new Gen AI functionality that you can add onto procurement, it makes that work a lot easier. I'm going to add one more thing just related to this slide. Another thing that we're exploring at Brex is the automation of flux analysis. And by that, it's not just taking the number from last month, comparing it to the number for this month, and just spitting out the difference for then my FP&A team or folks on my accounting team to investigate. Today, you can get an integration such that the number from the prior month is compared to the number from this month, but then the tool will actually read the underlying detailed listing that makes up the numbers from each month. And through Gen AI, it'll actually generate a proposed explanation of what caused the change. And so because we're on NetSuite, and the tool that we're using for this is called Numeric, but it can actually read the detailed listing of the GL account from the prior month and look at all the journal entries and the memos. It'll then look at the GL account from this month, same thing, look at the journal entries, the memos, and all the details. And it can make sense of, okay, this month we have incurred an additional expense because the cost for this vendor went up by X, or the cost for this vendor went down by Y, or we have an accrual this month for Z, but last month it was another number. And it really saves the initial investigation work that my FP&A and accounting team is doing. And now they're double checking some of the numbers against detailed listings that they pull themselves, but they can almost skip a lot of it and go straight to the business to investigate why something like this may have happened. And so this all just goes into this idea that with automation, our accounting teams can move faster and they can do more with the time that they have. And maybe this speeds up your close process. Maybe it frees up their time to do other analytical work that, you know, your business stakeholders and the executive team may find valuable. And overall, it also builds a much more sustainable close process because you've automated so much away with these tools. And so this is a continuation of the previous slide, but now that my team, and I have 1,000 folks at the company, my team is 15 folks onshore and 7 folks offshore, just to give folks a sense of comparison. But because we've automated a lot away, I think we've been able to, one, keep the team relatively lean. I think two, my team is able to do a lot more, I would say, analytical and work that's valuable to the executive management team and other department leaders across the company. And we can do like predictive analytics. Like we can do more analyses on how the ROI of a certain vendor can be measured. We can dig deeper into forecasts and why particular departments need this particular vendor and at this price point. We can do other benchmarking for our business versus our competitors to just give us more intelligence on how we should be performing. And then overall, we're doing more work on pricing. We're working with the product team on product development ourselves because, and that's cool for Brex because we sell financial services as well as financial software, and we're typically the first customer. And so we're actually able to spend time with the product team on those features. And we're also helping on like a variety of other strategic things across the company. Basically, my team has almost become a little bit more of a biz ops team as a result because we've automated a lot of this work away.
Neat. Well, we've got our second poll here. Let's get to that. Overall, how satisfied are you with your existing card and expense management solution? Select one of the following. Oh, this is easy. Get her done, audience. Couple more seconds here. All right, looks like we got voting done. There'll be 2 more polls, so we just have to answer 3 out of 4. Let's go ahead. Eric, I don't know if you really want to go over this one, right? Or do you want to? Or
no, I think it's just helpful information. Yeah.
All right,
I
sounds good.
understand that at the end of the day, card and expense management, like especially for T&E, it's not the highest cost contributor at the company, at most companies.
All right.
So I just talked about kind of like a lot of the benefits of Gen AI and what it can do for you. Right, working faster, streamlining potentially complex reviews by combining existing OCR technology with Gen AI capabilities. Generally increased productivity that your team will have because so much of the work has been automated away. I would be remiss if I just didn't share that there are some risks related to the Gen AI. I think a couple of things come to mind for me out of the list here. The first is It's change management, actually. So depending on the maturity of your company and how long you've been doing the process that you have in place today, I think there is a question of, okay, if I implement some kind of change to my process, whether it's bringing on a new system, whether it's adding some level of Gen AI processing to my workflow, is my team ready to do that? And do we have the resourcing to implement something new? And I think that's definitely a real consideration, especially if the area that you think the Gen AI is most helpful in for finance is not a big problem for you today. You always have to prioritize kind of like your own strategic thinking and where you want to focus your efforts on. Um, but my, I think the counter to that is right. Not, I mean, early bird, not early bird, but like you don't want to be on the bleeding edge necessarily of like adopting a new technology. But if you do have the clarity of vision on how a Gen AI product, or even just adding in some kind of chat GPT question and answer or like processing into your flow, like it can really compound in terms of dividends because you start early, your team starts seeing, you invest in like that change management time, and then you eventually hit the hurdle where, okay, now a lot of things are being automated and you can really set aside time to do all the other work. The best example I can give is like for a non-Gen AI example, which is our cash reconciliations. But yeah, in the beginning, we had to one by one set up all the bank accounts and the SFTP transfers into Blackline or reconciliation tool. And then we also had to one by one build up all of the individual accounting rules to automate the reconciliations and journal entries from there. And it was a slow go of it, but then you gave it a year, and by the end of the year, all that investment turned into something where we can actually maintain a 2-day SLA for all the bank accounts that we have across the company. And so that's just one of the things that I like to share. It's important to think about the value of this investment and what it will bring, not in the next month, but if you build towards it a year from now, and the scale that you can get as a result of that from your when your company is growing. I would say the other risk, this is one where I think it'll just take some time for it to come down. I do think some of these AI tools can be expensive. It's like the hot thing in the market right now. Pricing is what pricing is today, and sometimes I see a demo, it's really neat, and then I see the price tag and I think to myself, okay, now I have to weigh, for this cost, maybe it is better to just get a few more offshore resources to do this work, especially if the technology itself and the tool itself is very nascent and it hasn't proven its ability to scale as my company will scale in all the different processes that we may develop in the future. And the last thing is there is security and privacy issues. I think for a lot of companies, they don't want to have an AI tool leverage their own proprietary data to then train their model for then the use of that model by other folks or competitors in the industry. And I think that's a real concern. One thing that I think has been helpful is the creation, at least at OpenAI, of their enterprise model, where they basically partition your data, and that data will then be used just for you in your instance, but it won't be shared across the entire model for consumers or other businesses. And I think people have to get acclimated to trusting OpenAI to do that, and that's going to take time for them to earn that trust. But in theory, right, if it was Google that was offering the enterprise AI solution, if you're on Google right now, you kind of trust them to keep your emails and other data that you might have on Google Drive private. In theory, it's the same for OpenAI. It's just that they're a much newer company and they're still earning the business community's trust. I believe there's another poll question.
Correct. Let's go to our third poll. Launch. When evaluating spend platforms, what aspect of the solution is most important to your company? Select one of the following. Please take a few moments to answer. Few more seconds. Got 80% voting. And it's slowing down to a crawl, so we do have a fourth. Well, all right, so let's share those results. Erica, do you want to analyze any of this?
I mean, the answers are not surprising. I think for my team especially, right, whenever we're looking at a tool to implement, the change management is a big consideration. And so thinking about ease of implementation and then use for adoption, that's obviously really important. And then, yeah, it's the same stuff kind of we've been talking about this entire session, which is driving towards the automation of manual processes as much as possible, to save time, to allow us to do other more valuable work, to limit the resource requirement that our team may have, et cetera. I guess one thing, this resonates with me, the bottom one, which is making it easier for employees to be compliant. That's really meaningful at Brex, because I've been at companies, or I've seen companies where it is difficult to finish the month as the salesperson and then try to gather up all the receipts and upload everything and just make sure you're complying with everything. And so if you can take that away, sometimes that can take away significant chunks of time from a person whose core job is not really to manage their own expenses, but to do work in the field and sell something or do some other job. And so I think the easier you make for employees to go through a system or process, the more time you're actually giving back to them to do their core job, and that's also very valuable for the company.
Okay.
But maybe we can, yeah, like just at, going into our key takeaways slide here, and then one more question, I think.
Yeah.
So we're nearing the end of the session. Thank you all for attending and listening in. Just some key takeaways from the presentation today. You know, thinking about healthy growth is thinking about sustainable growth, and thinking about ways to pave the way. The way we at Brex are using Gen AI to do that is, okay, well, there are all these manual processes that we've been able to automate the way, and then also enhance the automation of with Gen AI. This allows my team to then work with all the departments and budget owners and the profit centers to think about next set of operations or next tasks in order to achieve our goals. So basically, we're just like way more embedded into the business to help them work their operations and understand the finances of their operations, because we've automated away so much of that busy work. And there's massive efficiencies that I think the finance function is gaining with Gen AI across the board. There's more to come. I shared a few examples related to order to cash, procure to pay, even our flux analysis. And I only think there's more development to come from here on out. And then the way I think Gen AI is really, it's not reinventing the wheel. It's taking an existing solution like OCR, like an automated flux tool that calculates the differences or changes automatically, and then layering on with that first iteration of what an accountant's preparation would look like, right? So it's spitting out what it thinks are the 606 considerations for a particular SOW or order form. It's spitting out what it thinks the right match is for an invoice to a PO. And it's even, coming up with a relatively detailed analysis and description of why a particular GL account has changed period over period. And then over time, I think as these models get trained more, they'll become more accurate and trustworthy. And it really just saves time for my team to do other valuable aspects of the finance function.
All right. Yeah, real nice summary. Thank you for that. So we do have one more poll, and it's an easy one. So let's launch that. Are you interested in learning more about Brex Spend Management Solutions? Select one of the following. So please just take a few seconds to answer that, and we will get on to our Q&A session and some instructions forthcoming on that. Just a few more seconds. Please answer. All right. So we will close poll and not share those results. And we will get to Q&A at this point. So I just would like to remind you to use the GoToWebinar control panel to ask questions. We'll get to as many as possible in the hour. So, Eric, we've got a very interesting question. Will AI help with the CPA and accountant shortage? Would you like to take that?
Yeah, there's a survey or an analysis that the Wall Street Journal published. I think it might have been 2 or 3 years ago, but in America, I think the number of accountants went from 1.9 million to 1.6 million, perhaps between 2019 and 2021 or 2018 and 2021. And so there's this huge dearth of folks in the profession. And some of it's like cost related, like salary related, career growth related. But some of it is also like perhaps because of automation and creating a lack of need for those positions as more stuff gets automated away, other than also like business process outsourcing and getting cheaper labor from India, let's just say. I do think AI will help with this because all the busy work that I mentioned, it does require time in the day, and that time in the day was filled with butts and seats. And now that AI, and then putting pressure on the remaining accountants and bookkeepers that we have in all of our functions. But then with this automation, it's obviously going to just alleviate some of that burden. And it may even allow the existing folks to be even more productive than they were before. But it will take adoption, right? It's gonna take time for all of these different companies to adopt AI in the way that it works for them in their own existing processes. But I do think eventually it will.
I do too, and I think that manual, repetitive labor and the burnout aspect of that, if that can be reduced, then the career choice could be more interesting, to students that are considering their options. So thank you for that. Here's another one. Do you think corporate finance adoption of AI is early in adoption or lagging other functions? What are your thoughts on that?
It's definitely in the early innings, if I'm understanding the question correctly. There are a lot of tools being developed to automate all kinds of, well, again, like I'll repeat myself, a lot of tools already exist to automate GL coding or reconciliations or 606 reviews. So people already have solutions or systems in place, and it's the question is, okay, I have a system in place. If I switch to another tool that embeds Gen AI, is it worth the incremental benefit that I may get, assuming like a stronger hit rate? And what I mean by hit rate is, okay, you may have some RPA tool or you may have some automation that gets you, call it 75, 80, maybe even 85% of the way there across your volume of transactions that you're reviewing. But then the question is, right, is getting AI and doing this other change management worth it for an additional 10 to 15 of additional accuracy? And that's a question that I think companies have to answer for themselves, because we're not going to be at 100% accuracy even from a Gen AI tool in the very near future. And I'm talking like 6 months to a year. It is going to take time for these tools to get even more precise and more dynamic. But if you are still on spreadsheets, if you are still doing manual reconciliation work, or if you're still doing work that's even run by a BPO, and ultimately a BPO service only scales with headcount, I think it is a good time to explore how an adoption of an automation tool, especially with AI, can give you leaps and bounds more scalability in a particular process, right? It can be a real step function change. I think people get scared about traditional RPA because, well, if I adopt this, I'm still only going to get a 75% hit rate. And so I still need to maintain some level of manual support to work out all of those issues. With how tools are being supplemented with Gen AI today, it does increase the hit rate a lot, and it can be very useful.
Great, thank you. That's good insight. Got a question from Ted Hollander. He asks, how do you think the use of generative AI should be disclosed? Any thoughts on that, Eric?
If I think about public company reporting, perhaps it goes into the risk section of your MD&A. In terms of the GAAP financial statements, I'm of the view that if the FASB hasn't released a particular rule, it's not necessarily something that I would voluntarily disclose in the GAAP financials. But from an MD&A perspective, if your company is using AI, or obviously there's two sides to the coin. If your company is thinking about using AI to increase the speed of its business or accelerate its results, that's certainly something that I would try to market or disclose for the betterment of company share price and like how the company is viewed by stakeholders and investors. I think in terms of risks, that might be something to consider, but I'm going to have to leave that to a lawyer.
Yeah, I gotcha.
Yeah.
All right, a couple more minutes. What will finance and accounting, how will it be different in 5 years with all this change? What is your crystal ball, Eric?
I don't think those 300,000 jobs or 300,000 accountants will come back, at least very quickly. I think that a lot of the function and the manual work will slowly get automated away even further. And I don't know if my team is necessarily a great representative sample, but what I try to get out of my team today is just a lot more analysis. So the books and records are being automated away by and large. And then my team can just spend a lot more time week to week, month to month, working with our business stakeholders and providing almost real-time reporting and results. to manage the business. So for example, today, because of the time that we're afforded on the books and records, we're able to actually do a weekly forecast now. So our revenue and everything is booked up to the day because of automation that we have. And every week, we then combine that with other key metrics that we're seeing in our data warehouse as they get populated from like other business operations. And we can actually come up and go to the executive team mid-month and say, hey, this is our performance to date. This is our forecast for the rest of the month. And give people, like, people aren't waiting until the end of month end close to analyze what's going on with the business. And so we can more rapidly react to potential changes or surprises, both on the upside and downside, as we maintain the company every day.
Great, thank you. All right, well, I'd like to say thank you to everyone. Thank you to Eric for the just amazing details that you shared. And if you look at this slide, it mentions everyone who registered today will get a complimentary copy of the Brex ebook, Are You a Grow CFO or a No CFO? So that is compelling. So that will be in the follow-up email. And I'd like to say thanks to Brex, our partner and sponsor and a leader in spend management and more. And last but not least, thank you to all of our attendees and great success to all of you in 2024. Goodbye.